Slack Tail Squad, assemble.
All right, this is the Slaptail Squad, and I am the Beaveman, Master of the Universe, your Lord and Savior. I don't know what other accolades can I give myself. General
Jeez,
of the
everything.
Slaptail Nation Army, Commander in Chief, Head Poobah.
You don't want to go with dictatorship because that really just over the top. It sounds like there's going to be a coup coming if you go rogue.
No, I definitely, I don't know. Would it? Maybe it would be better to be a dictator, king,
King maybe,
Lord
but
and Savior, Master of the Universe. I don't think that there's so much advantages to being a king. You know, after watching things like Game of Thrones and all those other shows that they make, like what was the one, the Tudors,
the Tudors, Nightfall.
Yeah, it seems like it
However,
was a pain in the ass to be a king because you still had to answer to some other body. So I'm like, fuck that. That's
well,
ridiculous.
I could have my history wrong, but in the medieval ages, you had to answer to the Pope or some religious body. But if you wanted to revolt, you just killed anybody associated with the church.
Yeah, that answering to the Pope, I think, is stupid as fuck. I can't believe that they used to do that. Like, it's like you totally forget the teachings of Jesus when you do all that shit. Why would the papacy be so fucking rich? You know what I mean?
Well, it was about power back then. You and I both know that. I mean, you want to be a dictatorship. You you know, it was basically about who's in charge and who has the influence.
Yeah, I
And
wrote a really I read a really interesting book. I can't remember the name of it, so that's not helpful. But I can look it up. But here, essentially, it was this. It was a book about this lady who was very powerful, but of course, being a woman, she couldn't be. She. It's not like she could be in power per se, but she was like the woman behind the power. So she was very influential on picking this and picking that. And of course, she couldn't be a
of
member
course,
of the papacy or she couldn't be like a cardinal or anything, but she was wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. It was called The Mistress of the Vatican. And this is
okay.
the true story of Olympia, sweet name.
Dukakis.
Yeah, Olympia Dukakis. Back then being Mistress of the Vatican. No, really good book. True story of Olympia Medalcini,
Ah,
the secret female pope. Pretty cool, actually. She was ahead of her time. Definitely manipulating people and acting as the game master of games. Anyway, don't know what I'm talking about. Just talking about powerful people, and apparently her statues and everything are still up in, um, I'm assuming Rome and all those areas. But it's pretty interesting. You could be a cardinal just by being an appointment. So every time a new pope was there, all these new cardinals would get picked or whatever. And you didn't have to be a priest or anything to be a cardinal. They just pick you based on your family and everything.
well, yeah, that's how power was back then. If you were, you know, from a very rich, influential family, and you wanted more power, or you wanted their land, or you wanted something from them, you put one of the family members in a position of power that could benefit you or mutually benefit both parties.
What's pretty crazy is when they were talking about selecting popes, as soon as a pope dies, they select a new one back in the day. And
Yeah.
what they would try to do is they would try to select a pope based on how long they would live. They didn't want them to live that long. So they were trying to pick somebody who wouldn't live very long because they knew as soon as they were pope, and people wanted to be pope because they would drain the papal coffers
Yeah,
basically
you've
of
mentioned that before. Yeah.
all the money, and then the new pope would have to get all that built back up through taxes or whatever other powerful scheme that they do or tributes that people would pay to them. So it's all so fucking corrupt, and you're like, did they not understand the teachings of Jesus, who was not all about that? Yeah.
You have to remember, though, back then, not only was religious power, uh, religion was power. I'm sorry the way I said it, but money was power too, and that's how you controlled armies. If you wanted them to go out and fight a crusade, you had to have money, right? Everybody died for their religion, and if the Pope said something that was one thing. I mean, you had to pay for an army somehow. So that's the way, they would drain it. I don't think they drank too much wine, but there could have been some wine involved in,
Yeah.
tending those grape fields.
Apparently, they use wine for a lot of things, also to like clean their clothing. So they would use wine instead of water.
Wow,
And that is
that's
why
one of those things.
apparently why a lot of their clothing, that the rich folk wore was darker, so they could use the wine to clean their clothes.
Well, that would explain the purple, which was considered royal.
Yeah, that's from milking an octopus.
I don't know
Very
where.
difficult it's difficult to milk an octopus.
Yeah, where are you going to find octopuses in the middle of Italy?
I don't know, but that's how they died. That's how they died. It was from the die of the octopus. I don't know. Well, they're on the sea, so clearly, I'm sure they found octopus.
Yeah, it's like
I don't know. The point is, I don't know, Ronz. I don't know these things.
Wow,
And everything I just said could be completely wrong. And that is the
no,
point. That is the beauty of this podcast.
no way.
No offense to you, but you're an idiot.
I think we're all idiots at some
I'm
point.
an idiot. Most of the things I say are completely wrong. I don't know though. I kind of always say that I'm completely wrong, so maybe I shouldn't do that. But whatever. Maybe I should lead people to believe that I'm actually intelligent when I'm not.
How many leaders do that though? They think they're in charge. They they act like they're in charge. They act like they know things, but in reality, they don't know that much. Let's face it. I mean, you and I are ex-military. We've seen guys who we thought were smart and knew what they were doing, and it was the troops behind them that actually knew what was going on, and they saved their asses. I don't know how many times.
Well, there's moving parts, so everybody has to know their moving part.
Yeah, but when you get that idiot in charge who thinks, oh, we're going to do it this way, and it's like, don't you think it would be smarter to do it this way? And they go, no, we're going to do it my way. Well, everybody, you got that one person who's going to be the volunteer fall guy. I'm like, go ahead and do it his way. So if he comes around, it looks like you're doing it his way. All the rest of us are going to do it this way. I heard a story from a friend of a friend who was in radio communications. And what he would do is he went to train these army guys out there. And he says, we're going to take apart this radio. We're going to add this little piece of wire to the circuit board. And this is going to increase our range by 1.5 miles. And they had this officer like, no, it won't. Yes, it will. Now, this guy was very intelligent in radio communications and the breakdown of the electronics of it. So he had everybody break apart the radio, and add this little wire to it. I'm probably getting the details wrong on some of this, all except the one officer that said it wouldn't work. And what they did is they put that person, all the way out in the field, just out of range, right? Everybody else was able to communicate during the drill except that guy, right? And so when they brung it back, when the drill was over or the exercise was over, this guy was livid and he's pissed and he's standing before whatever high-ranking person. And they said, "Why did you do that?" It's like, I did nothing. I listened to that guy. I told him my findings. Everybody else followed my findings, right? He didn't want to file. I gave him a radio just to the specs, and you can see the results. And they started breaking apart the radios and adding this little thing to it. And this high-ranking officer says, "You planned it that way, didn't you? You planned that guy to fail." I'm like, "No, but it worked out like that." So you know how it goes is that if the smart way versus the book way.
Well, it's not even the book way. It's being ignorant and deciding that you're not going to listen to somebody else. It's always like that. I mean,
Yeah.
the structure of the military in the first place is a little bit bizarre in that respect because they train folks to be officers without actually leading other troops, where they'll just lead each other, like in school or in OCS or whatever. And then they go to a unit as their first assignment, where even though they insist they were in the military, you're like, no, you were never in the military till you actually started leading troops. I mean, all that other stuff, whatever, that may count. I don't know if it counts towards their retirement or whatever, but whenever you get a brand new lieutenant, especially like for us in the infantry, you get somebody who's just finished school or just finished OCS or just came out of West Point or something like that, and they're used to dealing with other cadets, but they're not used to dealing with people who've been in the Army for several years.
Real world practical
Yeah.
application. Yeah.
So the smart ones listen to the platoon sergeant and listen to the squad leaders and listen to the team leaders and even listen to the Joes who are privates to tell them how things work. The dumb ones figure that they're going to do things, they're going to do stuff their own way, and we're going to comply with them, even though they have no actual experience whatsoever. It's kind of set up to, it's in my opinion, it's kind of set up for them to either sink or fail. And it's going to determine what kind of an officer they are later on in life, whether they're just going to be a straight up asshole dick who thinks everybody needs to bend to their whim, or if they're actually going to pay attention and be somebody who's all about a team. And because if you're all about the team, that actually makes you look better. Like
exactly.
if your platoon performs better, that makes you look good, whether you did anything or not, other than be the officer in charge of that platoon.
No, I agree completely. I just listening to a story where there was an officer new on site, and I think it was Air Force or Army. I can't remember one, but it's like they were digging foxholes. Excuse me. And they said they were digging them to a specific, but they said if we dig them too low, you won't be able to see anybody or whatever. And this guy came out and says, "I want my foxhole dug over there." And it's like, okay. And they came out and, they dug it, but they dug it a little too deep to teach this guy a lesson. It's like, you know what? You're telling us to do your work. And I realize that you're in charge, but, you're not willing to bust your ass with us, right? So what they did is they dug it real deep. So when he went into this foxhole, if I remember the story right, is that he couldn't get out, right? And come morning when the exercise was over, they came back and get him. It's like, why didn't you come and get me? Why didn't you find me? Because we were under strict orders for silence, right? And we followed what you said to do. Of course, we dug your foxhole, and of course, exercises mean if you don't make noise, you don't make noise, period, right? And after that, they said he was kind of humble after that. You shit on people, you're going to get it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, messing with somebody a little bit's okay, but in that respect, you're like, okay, that's going a bit overboard.
Oh, I don't think so.
Complete silence doesn't mean that you don't communicate. That's not what that means.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But if you're going to treat everybody, like your head person in charge, right, and you're going to treat them like shit, then they're going to comply with the letter of the law, right? And then you're going to get exactly what you want. Now, yeah, the smart thing is to make sure everybody's okay, check in on people. But you know what? When you start treating people like crap in the military, eventually they're going to set you up to fail because you set them up to fail. Right. You're not a team leader, as you mentioned.
The best thing to do, in my experience after all those years, instead of getting frustrated and angry about it, and I mean, which I still did, but you learn to do the Jedi mind trick on them. Oh. Where you make everything seem like it's their idea.
Yeah.
And if you do that, and I used to call it the Ranger mind trick because I would fuck with our Ranger qualified guys in the 82nd who, no offense to the Rangers, because when people say that they're a Ranger, I'm like, well, are you really a Ranger or are you Ranger qualified? It's kind of like airborne. You can go to airborne school and be a certified airborne, but you're not airborne. You're not a paratrooper, whatever. See, I was an actual paratrooper.
So when people say, do you get that patch to say that you are?
Yeah, you're airborne, but you're not a paratrooper. There's a difference.
Oh, I understand that, but to get qualified, I mean, you get the patch if you qualify.
You get the badge, yes.
So
you pass airborne school, you do your 5 jumps back in the day. I don't know if they changed it at all.
Okay.
Then you get to wear jump wings. That doesn't mean that you're a paratrooper. That means that you're certified airborne.
Okay. So it's
the same thing with the Ranger tab. People who are not in Ranger Battalion go to Ranger school, they come out and they're Ranger certified. They've been to Ranger school. And when they call themselves Rangers, I mean, and I'm not a good representative of that, but if you ask someone who actually served in Ranger Regiment or Ranger Battalion how they feel about all the 82nd guys calling themselves Rangers when they've never served in battalion, a lot of them they kind of go off. My first team leader in Germany, that unit that we were in together was the first unit that he'd been in that wasn't Ranger Battalion. And so he was an actual Ranger.
Wow. Okay.
So back in the day when they wore the black beret, and then some idiot gave that to everybody in the Army, which really pissed me off. And the Rangers now wear a tan beret. The black looks way better, but whatever. So yeah, if you ever really want a perspective, you'd have to talk to somebody who's actually a Ranger Battalion Ranger or Ranger Regiment and ask them how they feel about all the other units with people who wear Ranger tabs that never went to Ranger school. I mean, never went to Ranger Battalion. They went to Ranger school. I mean, I feel the same way about people who wear airborne jump wings. I'm like, oh, you went to jump school. Yeah. Okay. What airborne unit did you serve in? They didn't. So if they didn't do that, then they're not paratroopers. They're just airborne qualified.
So which leads us into the podcast. It's like,
does it lead us into the podcast?
It does. It's like, experiments gone wrong, or are we really that smart? So, going back to what you said,
No.
I'm like,
there you go.
No,
the podcast is now over. We are not that smart.
We are not that smart. But
definitely Ronz and I are not that smart. We're not that smart.
I thought I was smart until I thought I was smart until I looked it up online. Right. And when you said come up with a podcast, it's like reality versus internet. Like, we've already done that. I guess I'm not that smart to come up with something new. Right. Shout out to Tremonde, of course, because now he is actually finished. Now he can be qualified as somewhat smart, because did he finish the Star Wars yet?
Yeah, I don't know if he finished all of them. I know he watched the first one, which when we say the first one, we mean the first one. We mean episode 4. We don't mean all the other stuff. So he did watch it, but I thought it was kind of funny that he texted and said he was confused. And I was like, oh my God. So just save all those questions. So hopefully he will watch it again. Because I asked him if he wanted to do this podcast. He's like, oh, I need to watch it again. And so I'm just interested to see what he has to say. Because I'm a feeling like I'm going to be yelling at him, but whatever.
Well, you are the biggest nerd I know in Star Wars. Are we, you know what? We should also bring in Andy on this, right? Because he is also a big one. Now, I'm a Star Wars fan, but not as big as you are, Andy. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it would be fun to see if he'd be interested in doing it. But it might. I don't know. He probably won't get as emotional as I'm going to get, because I feel like I'm going to get pretty emotional. Because just from the brief questions that Tremonde put on his text, I was like, oh my God, just please don't tell me anymore. Just if you want to watch it again, and then we'll talk about it.
Without revealing too much, were his questions smart?
just the fact that he felt like he was confused was enough for me. I'm like, what are you confused about exactly? But I just told him to save it. Just save it, dude.
And I want to say, I understand where he's coming from, because if you've never watched him, now I grew up with.
Am I about to get angry? Am I about to yell at you?
Maybe, right. But if you've never watched him, and I grew up with them versus them coming out later, right? I think first Star Wars came out in 1977, right?
I think I was 4 when the 4. But they kept running it, because I actually did see it in theaters as a child.
But yeah.
I think it ran for like 3 freaking years or some shit. I don't know how I saw it that young, because my parents didn't even want to go to the movies, but I did see Star Wars in theaters.
But for someone who saw the episodes in the way they came in, 1977. And I'll double back here. For someone who saw it when they first came out, right? And I didn't know about 4, 5, and 6. Honestly, I knew it was Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, Revenge of the Empire, whatever it was called, right? I didn't know.
And we all called A New Hope Star Wars. We didn't call it A New Hope, the first movie.
I agree. However, George Lucas, if I remember correctly, said in 20 years I'll make the so-called prequels to this. So 20 years happened. He made them, right? So if you watch them out of order, the way because he made them in such a way that, what was the meme I said? Yoda name order, put them in order. You wouldn't get it. me growing up the way I did with watching them, I get it. And I could see where it would be confusing. Like, why do I got to watch this? And why are they, when you watch the old ones, right, 4, 5, and 6, you're like, wow, the graphics back then looked kind of crappy.
I
I
think
mean,
I think for the time they did them. I mean, when you
I
compare it to
agree.
the other sci-fi stuff, I thought it was pretty awesome.
I agree. However, when you watch the latest ones, you're like, wow, the graphics are great. Did they retro con the or retrofit the graphics to fit that when it first came out? I'm like, no, that's just the way it was made.
Yeah.
However, to Tremonde's question, which I don't know, by the way, I could see where he could get confusing because I had the option of seeing them when they first came out, so it didn't bother me seeing the lead up, we'll say. And if he wanted to watch them in order, he'd watch the lead up and then all the way to the end.
Yeah, which I don't recommend. I still don't recommend watching it in that order. I don't recommend watching 1, 2, and 3 pretty much at all. Pretty much at all. I don't really
Why is
recommend.
that? Why is that?
I think they're fucking horrible. I think they're terrible. I think they're the worst fucking. Each one has some redeeming qualities. I mean, there's some stuff that's good in it, but they're so not memorable, and the thing that angers me the most, and this is not a Star Wars podcast, but I think everybody knows that have ever listened to me rant about it or that knows me personally. My thing that probably bothers me the most is, although Darth Vader terrified me as a child,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
he is still one of my favorite characters of all time. As you can see from behind me,
As The Empire Strikes Back.
I probably
Episode
have just as
5.
many like figures of Darth Vader. I've got his helmet. I've got all other stuff. To me, he is one of the coolest villains of all time. And he has a strict sense of code and honor. So even if that's being evil, even if that's being an evil motherfucker, he's still a badass. Now, those first 3 movies ruined Darth Vader for me. Because Anakin is such a fucking pussy.
Okay, so once again, sorry for the confusion. You said the first 3 movies. Are you talking on my timeline?
I'm talking about 1, 2, and 3. The Phantom
right.
Menace,
the Attack
Clone
of the Clones.
War, Attack of the Clones, and whatever the last one is.
Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, so memorable that I don't even remember the names of them. So, yeah, that's what I mean. They made him into such a pussy, and they ruined Darth Vader for me.
Okay, all right. So what they took a memorable character and they said, okay, we're going to screw with this. When Star Wars first came out, you're right. I mean, all the major characters, the protagonist, the antagonist, they all stuck out. Even minor characters stuck out. I mean, Jabba the Hutt didn't have a big role in it, and neither did Boba Fett, but they had minor roles in it to move the story along, and they became such bigger players that everything was great. Watching The Mandalorian, right, which is a great series. I love that. That was a really good one. However, there was one character, and in 1, 2, and 3, I think, if I'm correct, that destroyed the entire franchise. What character do you think I'm thinking of?
Oh, you're thinking of Jar Jar.
I am.
Who I would say that probably most Star Wars fans are not fans of Jar Jar.
Yeah, I couldn't understand.
Punch him in his flipper head.
I couldn't understand the reasoning behind that. Why they included that character to either A, move the story along, which of course, if you watch background characters like I just mentioned, they move the story along just great. Right. However, Jar Jar Binks, I don't know how he could move the story along. So
I think they were trying to create a character that everyone would like and that was also amusing, and they failed miserably.
Oh, I agree. I mean, where he was this laid back, kind of clumsy person and happened to destroy half an army just with his antics. I mean, that's kind of Laurel and Hardy crap. And I'm like, that's not what Star Wars was about.
No, it's campy. I mean, it's campy in a horrible way. The only thing that was good about those episodes, I think, is one time like he was flicking his tongue out to eat things, and the one time he did it, he kept doing it, and Qui-Gon caught his tongue. He's like,
Mhm.
like, don't do that again, motherfucker. And that's exactly what he said too. If anybody's ever seen the movie, he said, "Do it again, motherfucker, and I'll cut that shit off." I still think, yeah, I don't know. Not a Star Wars podcast, but boy, there's a lot of Star Wars things I'd like to dive into. But you know what? As I get older, I forget more. But then I'll watch stuff and I'll see stuff that I never saw before, which is also cool. You know, Ronz, I actually have.
What's that?
When I went to California with the family, we were on Hollywood Boulevard. You know, where they have the Walk of Fame and the Chinese Theater.
Never been there, but I've seen it online.
And I went into this bookstore, very cool bookstore. I wish I remember that. I know I wrote it down. I actually kept the receipt, and they have scripts from. I mean, that whole place is just filled with scripts of different movies.
Wow!
So I have the scripts of the F4, 5, and 6.
Oh, here is an interesting fact.
You're not even amazed that I have those. You didn't even ask any questions. You're like, oh, that's cool.
No, well, I've been to your little shrine. I know what you have. I mean, your shrine, your room is dedicated to pop culture that you love, right? You've got Batman, you've got your guitar, you've got Star Wars, right? You're a pop culture icon lover. I'm in my son's computer room, of course, but I have video games, Kiss stuff. I have a Star Trek bottle opener, right? But if I go up into the other computer room, right, I've got coffee mugs. I've got a Walking Dead coffee mug. I've got a Lego coffee mug. I've got a Star Wars coffee mug. I've got various Star Wars memorabilia, right? You are a walking pop culture of what you like, right? So it doesn't. Hold on. Do you want me to look surprised? Really? Tell me more about the script.
Oh,
Was it
I mean,
autographed?
I mean, I thought you would be interested, but no.
I am, but
it's just fun to read them because I remember the movies.
Now, do they have side notes in them?
Well, what they have and what's interesting, of course, is that these are some. I'm not sure which cut of the script it is. It's not. They're not. I don't know. You know, when they do final cuts or whatever, or people ad lib. So there's information in there that was not in the movies. There's characters in there that was not in the movies, like Biggs. He has more lines in the script than are actually in the movie. So there's actually some character development of that character, which is like Luke's buddy. You know, so that stuff is really cool. When I got those, this was my grand dream when I got those. And of course, in my head, my grand dream was that I had lots of friends, which I don't.
Oh, I think you do. You've got more friends than you think, Pete, man. You really
do. Was to have everybody come over and do a script reading and play characters. I thought that would have been badass.
You know, they do that at Comic-Cons. They get the voice actors for animation, and they have them read in that voice, like SpongeBob SquarePants, Star Wars. They read the script, and I think I've seen it a couple times where one guy does whatever. He says, it's like, oh, we could swear? I'm Darth Vader, motherfucker. And I'm just laughing.
Yeah.
Check it out. It's really great. I like that. I would love to see you read a script, Beaveman, in your normal attitude, where I would play whatever character, and I'm like, oh, look, I've got this laser thing. It's a fucking lightsaber. It's a lightsaber. What do you do with it?
You dumb motherfucker. This is a lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think that would be fun.
I can hear the swan going, oh, wait a minute. Is it my line? Is it my line? No? What am I doing then? You're just sitting there. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that would be great.
I think it'd be fun to do, but I feel like it would only be fun to do with a bunch of Star Wars fans.
Not even. Get somebody who doesn't even know Star Wars, because then they wouldn't get the small references in it, and you would, and then that you could have your, like, don't you understand what they're doing here? Right?
Yeah.
For those who understand Star Wars and the subtle nuances, yeah, it makes sense to them. But for someone who watches the movie just to watch the movie, because it's not religion to them, it's not life to them. Those are the people sometimes you want, because then you can sit back and you can expand their knowledge. You can be top dog, right? You can be the awesome one going, this is why he did that from the right side, not the left side. You ever want to notice? You ever want to know why Darth Vader's lightsaber is red and why Yoda's is green or whatever?
Right.
It's the purity of the crystals, and nowhere is that mentioned anywhere in the movies.
Yeah,
right?
all the Sith's crystals are basically bleeding.
Right, but nowhere is that mentioned, right?
No.
And because
I think it's in the, if I remember correctly, though, I think it's in the script. Like there's some mention to it in the script.
The other thing is, when we first are introduced to Darth Vader, we think he's the only person in the universe until we're introduced to Darth Maul. We thought Darth was his name, Vader was his last name. That's who he was.
Right, no, it's a title.
Yeah. Darth is the title given to him by the Sith Master. And like,
it's kind of like when you do your confirmation when you're a Catholic, you get a different name.
Yeah, like
totally comparing the Sith to being Catholic.
Well, they are the dark side of the religion sometimes. But yeah, I thought that was fantastic. I mean, that blew my mind. Like, he's called Darth Maul? Is he like the brother of Darth Vader that we didn't know about? Right. And I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, there's some cool shit. That's why I foolishly, ignorantly, I thought that Tremonde would watch the movie and immediately be calling me like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I have so many questions, but that didn't happen. So now I'm like, oh, you sorry motherfucker.
Well, to some people who have never seen the movie, right, that's just the way it is. It's never interested them. Like when we were growing up, to me, sci-fi was the next thing to go into. Now, you look back in this current generation that we have, right? Or if we go back 2 generations, this and the last one, sci-fi is becoming such a norm in our life that it's whatever. Think about the flip phones coming from the Star Trek. No one equates that because we now have smartphones, right? Or flip phones that they're so common. When you think about having a computer on your side, right? In some of the old sci-fi movies, nowadays we don't think twice about it. We've got a smartphone. The Dick Tracy growing up, when he had that wristwatch that you could talk into. Now we could do that left and right.
Right.
We don't, this generation and the last generation, on the cusp of it, if you want us to go there, don't think anything of it because it's so normal. So, it's like, oh, look, the sky is blue. Okay, why is the sky blue? Why? Who cares? But I do. And I understand where
I care what the sky's blue.
I do. It's it's sort of like the universe. Like, why is the universe there? Well, if it wasn't, you wouldn't be here. You say that, but is that really true? Right. So,
did you you mentioned Godzilla and King Kong?
Yes, I did.
Did you get to see that movie?
I have not. Not
it's
yet.
Streaming. It is streaming.
Everything is streaming on the internet.
Yeah, but you could just get the free 7-day membership to HBO Max and stream it.
Oh, no!
Because right now it's on HBO until April 30th.
I've been doing other things at this time.
Oh, too. Excuse me.
Yeah,
pardon me.
Yeah.
Pardon me for trying to help you out. And in honor of you, Ronz, in honor of you,
in honor of me,
I watched Godzilla, the first one, and Godzilla King of Monsters. I didn't make it to King Kong Skull Island, but I've seen that one before. And I like that.
When you talk about Godzilla King of Monsters, are you talking about the current one or the old rubber monster?
No, the current one.
Yeah. We just watched that.
His head was kind of tiny. Godzilla's head was kind of tiny.
Yeah. Right.
His body just tapers into his head.
Yeah.
Well, but he looked different in this last one. Last one, he looked pretty. He was buffed up a little bit.
The one scene about that movie that really I liked was the appearance of Mothra, because they made Mothra look like this flowing, beautiful creature with luminescent wings.
That reminds me, I had to ask you a question about that, if you don't mind.
Okay. No, please.
So basically, if you haven't seen Godzilla, spoiler, this is Godzilla King of Monsters, the most recent one, which I don't know what year it came out with, but I was watching it because Ronz was talking about Godzilla, or Gojira.
Gojira, yeah.
Gojira. And Mothra comes out, and so Mothra basically jizzes on Godzilla.
So
I mean,
basically, what you're trying to
that's my
tell me is I
takeaway.
just watched Japanese porn.
That was my takeaway. Godzilla was, I mean, God bless him because he had to fight so many other fucking monsters. He was fighting what, the Ghidorah or whatever his name is. The
Yeah,
three-headed
Ghidorah, the
Ghidorah.
three-headed monster.
And Mothra just jizzed all over Godzilla and just made him happy. So he got up and kicked some ass. That's what I took from it. So does that mean Mothra is actually male and Godzilla is a girl, and that's why she got up and started kicking some ass because she got jizzed on?
Well,
I mean, basically, was that a metaphorical jizzing? What was that?
It could have been. I mean, I think Godzilla's. I think a lizard which is asexual, where they can reproduce on their own. Right. Some species are asexual, but I'm not familiar with that. I'm just guessing.
Well, I don't know that they reproduce on their own. I mean, don't they lay eggs and then the eggs get fertilized?
I guess so. Once again,
is that what a reptile does? I don't know these things. I don't know.
I don't know.
That's why you and I can just speculate. I'm pretty sure. I'm going to go out on a limb here, Ronz. I'm going to say, and that goes back to the whole chicken and the egg, which came first, the chicken or the egg? The egg did. And why is that? Because reptiles were on this planet before chickens, and reptiles lay eggs. So technically, yes, the egg was always here before the chicken.
Well, and here's something that ties into you. I pulled up these 25 fun facts about Godzilla because I didn't know this, by the way. I didn't know this one.
Go ahead, shoot, because I'm sure I'm not going to know, because my memories of Godzilla
are
from being a little kid and then most recently watching the Godzilla movies.
I'm going to wait until you're done taking your drink here. It was discussed that a Batman versus Godzilla crossover movie was never produced. Have you ever seen the small film Godzilla versus Bambi?
No.
Watch it. It's hilarious. It's a 30-second clip. I think it's about 30 seconds, but I won't destroy the ending for you. But that would last about the same long. Batman versus Godzilla. All he would do is stomp on the ground and crush Batman.
I know. The stuff that Batman can do is so unbelievable. There's I think it was the New 52 where everybody got turned into monsters and Batman's like fighting monsters. And not a fun series. I thought those comics kind of sucked. That particular like 5 or 6 comics. I'm like, this blows. Whatever. But yeah, Batman would have been dead his first night, I feel.
Yeah, just by
that's why it's the comics. That's just why it's the comics. No, I mean just Batman's first night as Batman. I feel like he would have been killed.
How so? I mean, I'm thinking that he'd stomp. I mean, and honestly, the other way I could think of is he's trying to fly the bat plane and he just gets swatted like a fly.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It was a fun little premise. It was a decent movie.
Godzilla has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame too.
Everybody has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Lots of people. Hey, when I was on Hollywood Boulevard, by the way, we went to the Scum and Villainies Cantina or Canteen.
One of my goals to go out there and watch the podcast if this pandemic ever lifts.
Yeah, and while I was there, guess who came in? Guess who came in to chill out with everybody? You're never gonna guess anyway.
Let's see.
Still not gonna guess, but
Jason Mewes.
No.
Kevin Smith.
No. Well, Kevin Smith was there. It was his podcast.
Well, you asked me who. I mean, if he wasn't you didn't tell me you were doing the podcast. You just went in or see. I
can do the podcast. I went to see the podcast. Nobody asked me to be on the podcast.
Skyler showed up and he was there.
Well, yeah, he was there also. He was with me.
Did you get his autograph?
No. No, Mark Hamill's son showed up.
Whoa.
I didn't talk to him or anything because I didn't want to be one of those people, like, oh my God. Because it's not like you're interested in talking to him anyway. You're like, tell me about your dad.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, you're second generation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and apparently he's big on making, he makes like the little characters, monsters and stuff like that, like figurines.
Okay.
That's apparently what he does. Like Dungeons and Dragons type or whatever genre. So that's kind of cool.
Wow. And since he was at the podcast, was he on the podcast?
No, it was a Kevin Smith, Mark Bernardigan podcast where they just talk about what's going on
Yeah,
pop
but
culture
when
wise.
since
He's a regular
Kevin,
there. I mean,
oh, I was going to say, since Kevin Smith is a big pop culture fan, having the son of one of the biggest pop culture movies of all time show up, I mean, you wouldn't want to put him on. You wouldn't want to put him on stage and talk to
no,
him.
because I imagine it's the same thing. Yeah, these people are used to seeing other people walk around who are kind of in the industry. So they probably don't get geeked about that stuff. It's kind of like when Skyler was talking to us about it too, is, when he went to do extra stuff and when he was at the Georgia Film Academy, they tell them, like, don't overreact to these celebrities. They're just people. Just do your job and you'll get very used to it. They don't want you so I'm assuming that these people are the same way. Whenever you hear something like when Mark Maron's podcast, he's done over like 1,000 some interviews, but he still gets nervous about interviewing certain people. And I'm like, dude, you're famous too. I mean, like, you might not be as famous as these people, but why do you get so hung up on doing? And he interviewed Barack Obama, for God's sake. If you would interview the acting president when he was a president on your little podcast, I don't think it would be a big deal to talk to, Sylvester Stallone.
Well, when you're a fan, like when you asked me to do the podcast the first time, and I'm like, I was geeked. I am still geeked to this day that I get to do the podcast, and I'm like, who are we going to meet? What are we going to talk about? I mean, who are we bringing in? I am always going to be geeked to do this, right? I have to stop myself from going, I have a podcast. Well, we have a podcast. You have a podcast. I get to be a part of it, right? So I run around geeked as all get out that I do a podcast, right? And I will always be geeked. I really will. This is something I enjoy. I mean, and I'm hoping whenever I drop the knowledge that I do a podcast, they're like, really? And they're just as geeked as I am that, hey, would you like to be on it though? And they're like, wow, I've never done that. Yeah, sure. Right.
Is this
So
actually happened, or is this a dream that you had where people were actually excited when you said, "Hey, would you like to be on it?"
yeah, it is. It is because, the more people that we get involved on it behind, like once again, when Tremonde does it, it to me, it's so much fun. When the Swan does it, it's so much fun because it's a play off of different personalities. They're not treated anybody. We don't treat them any different than anything else, but it's such a fun interaction. Right. And speaking of interaction, shout out to all the frontliners, the police out there, because I got questioned when I was walking home. I wanted to bring that up real quick too.
Oh, please do. You got questioned.
Yeah,
What were you wearing?
I was wearing black jeans, my black hoodie. Right. I wear different black hoodies, but I was.
Was your hood up or hood down?
My hood was up because, and I'll tell you what happened and how this led up to this. I was doing a computer job for someone in the neighborhood, right? And I kind of figured it out, but their laptop lost charge, and I'm like, I'll come back another day and we'll figure it out, right? So a friend of mine who has his own store selling computer games, I walked down there because he's right in my neighborhood. I walked down, because he wanted to show off his new computer case, and I did that. And I stayed there for a little bit of time, and I said, you know what? It's getting late. I got to head back home. I got to get up early. And I'm going in my neighborhood with my backpack. I've got all my tech gear with me, right? And I've got my Bluetooths on. I'm listening to whatever. And I'm walking down my road, right, the street I'm on, and all of a sudden these lights hit me, right? And I look over, there's an SUV, and it says police on the side.
So, like, he hit you with the searchlight or with your actual?
Well, now they have LED lights into the door handles, right? So they hit the switch and it looks like a rave. You've got all these lights hitting you. And I'm like, well, what do? Do I walk away or do I freeze? And I thought, you know what? I got nothing to hide. I'll just keep walking. Well, they pull up beside me again. And this time I stop. I look in, right? They roll down the window and they're like, where are you coming from? And I explain things where I'm coming from. Do you happen to know the person's number? Do you know their address? I'm like, no, I don't. I just know how to get there. Like, but I could give you her phone number. I actually did have her phone number in my that. And I said, you can call her and confirm where I was, and then you can call the person that I was just left. You can confirm what I was doing. Okay. I said, what's this in particular for? We've had people in the neighborhood knocking on doors and running away or causing problems.
You're like, yes,
And,
that's me. I'm over 50 and I'm going to knock on
but
doors
you
and
know
run
what?
away.
You can't tell because one, I was wearing black jeans, and and I don't weigh 220 pounds anymore, right? And it's 40 degrees outside, because the temperature dropped to between 30 and 40, and I'm walking back in the dead of night, right? Wearing black. I mean, I was just wearing a hoodie to stay warm, and I'm just minding my own business. So I answered all their questions, but it was just one of those things. Like, it's nice to know that I can be considered a bad person or a bad boy or one of those, but I'm not really.
Yeah, it would be so hard if something like that happened to me, because I'm just like, what the fuck do you want? I mean, seriously.
And you know what? And with all the bad things that are going on in the world with police and criminals, both left and right, the thing is, cooler heads prevail. What am I going to yell? One, why are you questioning me? Right? It's simple questions. I've got nothing to hide. Right? Boom. And I answered all the questions, and I'm like,
yeah, except they don't usually answer your questions back. They want to answer questions, but they don't want to answer questions back.
no, and it was a female, and she was kind of cute, and she answered all my questions.
Then that would have been different. I would definitely been. I would have definitely been more civil, because I'm like, hey, yeah, nice.
Yeah, and that's what I said. I said, what would the Beaveman do? And I'm like, yeah, nice. Yeah.
Yeah. The Beaveman would turn it on and try not to be creepy, because now he's old. Because now you don't want to be, because the older you get, you're like, okay, I don't want to be creepy.
But, and I agree with that, but you don't look that old. You still look like you're in your late 20s, early 30s. You really do.
This last 2 weeks, I have had patients ask me how old I was several times.
Oh,
and I was like, first I tell them, I'm like, well, honestly, not really an appropriate question, not a question that needs to be asked. And it doesn't matter in any way, but I'll answer you anyway. And all the patients that asked me, I was older than them.
You know why they ask that? Because, first of all, old age usually equates knowledge. Not always true. We both know
true.
that.
I mean, that's not true. But, I mean, like, when do doctors finish? When are they done? I mean, if you've done 4 years in pre-med, you did 4 years in medical school, you did 1 year as an intern, so that's 9 years, and then you do an additional 3 to 5, depending on what your specialty is. So you might get out in 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, 15 years, and then you might do a fellowship. So by then, they're very young, but they know a ton of shit. So I hate that when they're like, well, that doctor's young, he doesn't know anything. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. You have worked at Meyer for the past 30 years, and you're questioning this doctor that just spent 15 years. It doesn't matter if they just finished. They just spent 15 years.
Well, they know more than you because it's on the internet. Let's face it. They, that
oh,
little.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's exactly right. I mean, when you go out there and they're like, okay, this is the way it is, right?
Yeah, every patient that asked me was in their 40s, and I was older than all of them.
So you know what? You should go to wherever they work and go, can I get someone a little bit more knowledgeable and older that understands what they're doing?
Yeah. I mean, and this was before I even asked them their history or was doing their exam and stuff. That was the first thing they asked, like, how old are you? And I'm like, and I look at their chart. I'm like, well, I'm older than you are. And they're like, wow, you look really good for your age. I'm like, well, it's the mask. It covers half my face, so you can't see what the rest looks like. So
you don't look that old, man. You really don't. I mean, you look like you're in your late 20s.
That's pretty absurd. I don't think I look that young, but I don't get carded. I don't get carded anymore, which is nice.
Well, it's because they know who the grocery store is.
You don't get carded anymore, and they're supposed to card you if you look, I think, younger than 40 now is what it's supposed to be. So I don't get carded at the grocery store anymore.
Well, do you go there regularly?
No, I hate going to the grocery store.
Oh.
And if I can get away with it, I do that self-checkout thing anyway. So,
Yeah. So no, you I understand where that's coming from. So
I don't. It's still an ignorant question, though. It doesn't matter if I'm younger than you. I know more than you. That's why you're there.
Well, you always know more than me. I've noticed that.
That's not true. I'm pretty decent at making shit up. I was talking to my doctor the other day. This was interesting. This should interest you, Ron. Speaking of people who act like they know shit.
And that brings me to another topic. Sometimes it's like when you walk in and you don't drop the knowledge that you work in the medical areas, right? And I think we talked about this on a previous podcast. Is like more than these guys. You walking in sometimes, and when they go, "Oh, we're going to do this here," you're like, "Really? Right? Do I look like I need an enema?"
I just shit, so I don't pretty much I don't need one.
Yeah.
No, I've always had this problem with medicine where people will lie to a patient's face, and I can hear them lying, and I'm like, you don't know what's wrong with that person. Why did you just lie to them? And like, because what am I going to do? Tell them I don't know? I'm like, yeah, that's always been my policy. I will tell people I don't know if I don't know something, and usually I'll follow it up. I don't know if I do that so much anymore because now I'm old, but usually I'll follow it up with I don't know, but I will refer you to somebody who can try to help you figure it out.
That's a standard military answer.
I'll do this other stuff, blah, blah, blah. Because it's no way I can know everything. I know so very little in the first place. So the other day, and the Slaptail Nation probably doesn't know this, but this does not make me any weaker as your master of the universe. But I'm in pain 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day I'm in pain. I don't take medicine for it or anything. But it's gotten worse over the past almost 2 years now. Now I have other symptoms that are very perplexing to me that I can't figure out. So I went and saw my doctor, and he didn't do anything. He just wanted to throw medicine at me. And so I went and saw the VA doctor who I used to work with many years ago in the emergency room when I was a nurse. And we were talking about it, and he ordered some studies for me. And one of the studies did come back pretty bad, but it was all musculoskeletal related. Nothing was pushing on my spinal cord. Nothing was pushing on the nerves that branch off my spinal cord. So it didn't explain the pain that I was having. So I went and saw the neurosurgeon, and he said there was nothing surgical, and he thought maybe I had what's called a connective tissue disorder or like an autoimmune disorder. So autoimmune disorders, things like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or whatever. So I don't agree with him. But hey, whatever, because for one thing, neurosurgeons just do neurosurgery and things like that. They're not, they don't do that deep investigative stuff anymore. So I talked to my VA doctor he called me. It was nice of him. Actually called. So we had a good conversation, and went over my symptoms and what the results of the testing was and what the recommendations of the neurosurgeon were. And, I told him I didn't know what was going on. I had some theories maybe, but nothing concrete. And, we talked about the next steps and stuff, but he actually told me, he's like, yeah, I don't know. He's like, it's bizarre. He's like, I don't know what's wrong with you. And, I said to him, you know what? That is good to hear that you don't know, because most people will just lie to you and say that they know.
As you stated, doctors are humans too. Some of them are. I think some of them are still aliens trying to take over the world. However, I mean, if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and that, to me, that makes him a better doctor by saying, hey, you know what? I don't know what's going on. I've got some theories, but they're not, you don't really fit those either. And so we were actually bouncing ideas off of each other. But I told him straight up, I was like, you know what? I respect you so much for just telling me you don't know.
So on that note, do you think the bedside manner of doctors has gone away, the communication level?
No, because most of them have been assholes throughout Western medicine. When did they ever have bedside manners?
Well, the one
that's like a rare thing. Like what? 1 out of 15 of them is not a dickhead. I don't know.
So when for me, I mean, one of the questions I asked when I had surgery on my arm or my hand was, I asked, what's your score on Super Mario Brothers or some video game? And he looked at me and he couldn't make the correlation. He says, oh, I don't know, but I can hit a fastball, a 98 mile an hour fastball. And the reason I asked that was because the higher the score.
And you're right? Like, I don't know sports.
Yeah, but the higher the score was, the more hand-eye dexterity he had, or hand-eye coordination. And you don't want some guy with thick glasses working on your arm or your hand during surgery going, I can't see. Can someone, I don't. I don't know. To me, that I would have gotten another doctor, regardless of how competent he may have been.
Yeah.
But he answered my question, and he was really calm about it. Of course, when you've got a gaping wound, because I'd sliced a tendon open, or I'd severed a tendon, and he was just like really calm. He's like, "Okay, cool. I'll answer any other questions you got for me." And I'm like, the bedside manner, because I might have been having a trauma or shock because of the cut, and he was really cool with it. Right? So I'm thinking that because you found one of those doctors, and I had a physician on call that night, that's what have we gotten away from that communication level.
Yeah. Well, part of it is they don't have any time. For one thing, a lot of them don't have time, and a lot of them they used to do this thing when I was a trauma nurse, and I used to talk to the doctors about it and say, "Don't do that." I'm like, "Try this instead." And what they would do is they would call people by their room number, or they would say this case, and they would call them this case or case belly pain or case whatever. And so what I would say was, try this. Try calling them by their name. That's what the nurses do. We say, "Oh, Mr. So and so or Miss So and so." You guys call them a number, or you call them this case or whatever. I'm like, you should get out of that mindset, because what you're doing is you're, what do you call it? Itemizing them or not assigning them any type of human qualities whatsoever.
Yeah, one of the things that, and I don't know how true this fact is, that one of the best things you could do for someone is call them by their name
Yeah.
when they're doing something. Like when I was a water boy, we'll say that, for the local marathon runners, I'd volunteer my time. And when someone would run by, we'd say, "Beaveman, way to go. You only got like 20 more miles to run." Or,
You're like eating a candy bar. You're like, wow, that looks like it sucks.
yeah, it does. And I'm like, wow, way to go.
Wouldn't catch me doing that.
Yeah. Or, I've got donuts back here. I'm going to munch on my donut in one hand, you water as you run by. Way to go. Keep it up. We're like, really? But yeah, I can only imagine that, if you treat someone less than human, how they would react.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm glad you found someone doing that. And
Yeah.
that.
During the course of our conversation, though, he also told me he was planning on retiring next year. So I was like, oh, that's good.
So he's got
Good to
every
know.
reason to be
Good to
nice
know.
to you.
He's like, yeah, exactly. Like, I was like, oh, I said, so in my head, I'm like, oh, so you're telling me all this because you won't even have any sort of responsibility for my care anymore. So you're like, oh, what the hell? Well, yeah, I don't know what's going on, and good luck with that next doctor that you have.
Wow.
Which
and
is fine.
it's like when you look at that's kind of like the Stanford prison experiment gone wrong, right? It was funded by the U.S. Naval Research, and it was to find out how people or a person acts in situations and not their personality. And when you look that up, it went horribly wrong, right? And it's like, do people react like I know your personality. You're always outgoing, and you're always helpful with anything that you do with people. At least that's what I understand you to be. But given a situation, would you turn off that personality, and would you become more brutal, or would you be more passive, given the situation? So, and when we talk about the doctors like that, or for that matter, anybody, as long as you have a great communication rapport, and you're about to retire in a year, I guess, that would work.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, in that case, you're just like, well, good luck. I hope you are able to retire. It's like getting paroled retirement. Like that's like
Really?
like the dream. That's like the dream. I don't think that's going to happen for me, but
well, it depends on if the world ends.
well, yeah. Before we wrap up today, I had a question for you. Did you have any victories this week?
Victories?
Yeah, small, large, doesn't matter. Any victories this week that made you feel like life is worth living?
Yeah, I mean, I get to be with my family, my wife, and I get to do a podcast.
Alrighty.
What about you?
Let's see. I small victories this week. I had the door handle was a little bit loose downstairs to the training hall, so I tightened that up, so now it's not loose anymore. To me, that's a small victory.
Now, did it become loose because of your super strength?
No, it became loose, I'm sure, just from overuse of opening and closing the door. But so that I have to. That's what I have to do. I have to find these small victories. This other small victory I had was the fan in our bathroom was making a lot of noise, and I fixed that, which it just needed to be the height of the fan as it spins inside its housing needed to be adjusted. So now it's not making noise. So that's my small victories, Ronz, because I have a lot of
Wow.
defeats all the time. So now I'm going to have to actually find tiny victories in order to make my life worth living.
Well, you've got me. You've got the Swan. You've got. And by the way, where is the Swan? Why isn't she with us today?
She's just not with us today. The swans and the Beaveman don't always get along. Those things happen.
Either that or she's sleeping. No, I understand that. Well, back to what we're going to talk about, the podcast experiments. Are we really smart or just some science experiment gone wrong? Here's a science experiment that went really wrong that no one wanted to deal with. And it deals with bubble gum flavored broccoli. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, there's a famous franchise that was trying to develop something like that. I won't say
McDonald's.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say them, but yeah, it's them. And I can't imagine who the hell would think of something like that, and why in the world would they think that would sell?
No, the only way that would work is if none of us had ever had broccoli. So if you took people who were newborns and you started giving it to them at a young age, they might like broccoli then. But for us, broccoli is always going to taste like broccoli. If you flavor it as something else, it's just going to disgust us.
Well, I like broccoli. I mean, I like
I do
broccoli.
too. I mean, I like broccoli too. And if you like broccoli, listeners, try this healthy spin on broccoli. One, you can put butter on it, which real butter. I'm not talking country crock, margarine, all that other shit. Real butter, get your healthy fat in there. Or this is a good one, Ronz. You get coconut butter, which is just coconut that's been blended until it's in basically a liquid form. The colder it is, the more solid it is. When it's warm, it's almost oil.
I use coconut oil at home. Yeah, so I understand.
No, not coconut oil, coconut butter.
All right.
Much thicker. It's literally just pureed coconut. And then you warm that up in the microwave if it's not in a liquid form, and you pour that on your broccoli. It is very sweet.
What's broccoli?
Broccoli. Pour that on your broccoli. It's very sweet. It's delicious, and that's a good healthy fat. So take that from the Beaveman. Coconut butter on your broccoli.
Okay. But if I think they were going on the concept of like carrot cake, you put any vegetable with 5 pounds of sugar, it'll taste good. But no, that was just one of those things where it was destined to fail.
Well, carrot cake's probably like the worst cake for you.
No way.
It's super delicious, but yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. Look at all the sugar they put in it. Carrot, who gives a shit? They're like, why even put a carrot in it? What do they do with it then? Then they frost it and put little frosting carrots on top of it. Little orange and green carrots on top, made out of frosting for you to eat it. Yeah, it's delicious. I love it too. And then they use what is it? They use it's sour cream frosting. Is that what it is?
Or cream cheese frosting. You can go either way.
Yeah,
it's the most healthiest
dessert. Not
sour
cream. Sorry, cream cheese.
That's okay, but it's a healthy dessert.
No, it isn't.
It's made with yes, it is.
There's nothing healthy about it. And then they throw raisins in it. You know how much sugar? You know how much sugar is in a raisin? Oh my god!
It doesn't matter. It's a healthy raisin. Yeah. And then you get into zucchini bread. That's great, right? If you're going to try and flavor my vegetable, hide it so I don't know it's a fucking vegetable. Plain and simple. Hide it.
That's what I'm saying. You're not really getting anything healthy by eating that.
I am. I'm eating a carrot and I'm eating zucchini. Right. You're just putting it in ways that I would just know healthy.
See how healthy you are if you just eat carrot cake and zucchini bread.
You know what? I will accept that challenge. I will. But I would have to. I would have to make a lot of zucchini bread and carrot cake. Right.
Yeah. Go ahead and try that. Just try it for a week and see how much you weigh. You should do that experiment.
I'm going to do that after May, because right now I'm training up until May.
What are you training for now this time?
No.
Or
shout
you're just
out
training.
to
you're just training in general.
No, a shout out to my lovely wife who's going for her first degree black belt in Okinawan weapons, Kobudo, and that's happening in May possibly.
Now, let me
So,
ask you this question: is it
yeah,
Kabuto or is it Kobudo?
it depends how you pronounce it.
Well, I mean, the do part of that is that the do part of it that means way, or is that do part of it as in that's the name of it and it would be Kabuto do?
No, it would be the way if I'm
Okay,
correct. I could be
so
wrong on
I
that,
don't
but
know. I just wonder how the whole syntax and the use of the words and stuff with people that do not speak, that's not our primary language. Clearly, we don't have much of an understanding of that.
well, the Japanese language is like a metronome, right? It speaks one speed, right? All if I remember, because I've actually been studying up on this, is like, and once again, I'll say I'm probably wrong,
Yes, we're
but
probably wrong. Keep that in
we're
mind.
probably wrong. That one word, one letter, or the pronunciation of the word is, if it's broken up like domo arigato gozaimashite, one part of that word is no greater or less than the previous syllable, like domo ari, right? It's just domo arigato gozaimashite, right? Now, Americans tend to inflect their words, right? Up, down, not monotone, right? And when you watch the Japanese language, now I disagree with this. It's usually this cadence, domo arigato gozaimashite, right? Because sometimes they do add emotion to the word, right? Where Americans, or our language, and German languages and Italian languages, they add a lot of emotion
This is a
to
really
it.
long answer to my question.
Yeah, you know what? It is what it is. We'll call it that.
It's really, really long answer to my
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
That
and
was a very simple question,
yeah.
which you probably should have just said, I don't know.
And here's the big reveal for you, right? I know you're going to yell at me, so I'm geared up. You told me not to mention a certain band name ever again. I snuck it in over the last 14, 15 podcasts. Really subtle. Because if you go back and read some of the posts that I made for the podcast on Facebook, and you take the first letter of every post, you'll see it spells out that particular band name.
And
So there
so
was
you
your
expected me to give much of a shit about that?
no, but you threatened to fire me if I ever mentioned it again. I'm like, challenge accepted. I accepted that
So
challenge.
you actually suspected that there would be anybody other than you and maybe one other person that would figure that out and find it even remotely interesting.
Well, it goes back. It's like small victories, yes, but are we as smart or we as we think we are, right? And you like, if no one read it, right, and if you read the post, right, you would know that there's something on there, right?
Uh-huh.
Because how many posts begin with the letter Q?
Okay. That's fascinating, Ronz. Nice job. Everyone here is now less
Thoroughly bored of
intelligent.
my puzzles.
Everyone here is now less intelligent than they were 4 minutes ago. Nice
4
job.
minutes ago.
Nice job.
Yeah,
Now that
I
they've
agree with you. Is there anything you want to yell about, by the way? You haven't
no,
yelled at once.
no. Let's see. Small victories and major defeats again this week. I have had 2 interviews for a permanent position because I'm sick of being a contractor. Don't want to do it anymore.
Are they
And
local?
yes, and I did
Awesome.
not get either job.
Oh, man.
One, they just never communicated back, and their own HR kept telling them, "Hey, is this job? Are you giving this job? What are you doing here?" And they're never heard back from them. They didn't even respond to their own HR. And the other one decided that after interviewing and telling me what a great job I did in an interview, they decided that they actually don't have any budget for that position, and that position is not open to anybody.
So why did they put the effing job out there then?
Great question, Ronz. A great question, because they thought that they would, and then right after that, literally after my meeting, they had like a budgetary interview, and realized that they could not open the position up right now.
No, I don't think they could afford the Beaveman because we know he's the best. And when you're the
Yes, that's totally it.
best, right? That's how it goes.
But there are a couple of positions out there that have nothing to do with nursing or medicine that they're not positions, but they're trainings that I'm thinking I would like to apply for that are open to veterans. I think I'm going to do it. So,
Wow. get the stamp of approval on your document by the Beaveman, trained and certified by you.
Right.
Right? Would you get that hoo-ah from like the Ranger Squad or something like that?
Probably
Right?
not.
I think that'd be cool. It's like, they look at the credentials and they're like, okay, you were trained here and here. Oh, you have the Beaveman seal of approval. All right, we'll get back to you
I didn't
most
say I was
definitely.
going to be training people. I said I looked at a couple of trainings. There are a couple of jobs that are being offered to veterans through the veterans with veteran assistance. So I think I'm going to check them out. Maybe I can change my career. That'd be nice.
Would you like to possibly go into behavioral specialists or
No.
something like that?
No.
So what would be a good change for you? What career would you like to go into besides podcasting?
Besides podcasting, I would like to own my own business. I would like to own my own coffee shop, but it's just not it's not fiscally responsible right now. That's for sure.
No, yeah, and shout out to a friend of mine who ran her own coffee business and had to retire it. She did cold brew, and it was great. I loved her and her setup. I got to know her really great. She was a great friend of ours, and much success to her endeavors. But I agree with you. What would you call your coffee house then?
Oh, I would just
Or your coffee
I'd
place?
buy into a chain.
Oh, yeah, but where would be the original Beaveman? It's like, hi, I'd like
Because
coffee. Get the fuck out of here.
here's the important thing with all that stuff is why would you reinvent the wheel if you could buy a franchise that's already successful and the business plan is already laid out for you and everything?
Well, sometimes the wheel needed reinventing.
Yeah, if it's already a successful machine, why would I think that I could make it more successful? I'd rather
Because-
buy. There's two products out there that I really like that you could be a franchise for either one of them. Like, I think that would be a great deal. But right now, no, it's definitely not fiscally responsible for me to even think about doing something like that.
Yeah, okay, but
I'd rather step into something that's already pre-made with a product that I really enjoy and like than try to do it on my own. Because I would just fail.
I don't think you would fail.
Oh, yes, I would.
You
I would definitely fail because I'm not a business person. That I know me. You know what? If nothing else in this world, I know me.
I don't think you would fail for the simple reason that I've got a friend of mine who runs a local business who's moved 3 times, but he's got people behind the scenes helping him. Right? I've come out and I actually helped him start the software side of his computer repair business. He was hardware. I showed him software, right? He builds computers. That's great, right? I showed him how to do certain things. He showed me how to do certain things. And we kind of built his business up together. Behind the scenes, I'm his labor guy. Whenever he says, hey, I need someone to help me build a pool table. Are you available? Yeah. So I go out there, right? Hey, I need stuff moved around in my store. Are you available? Yeah. So, he's got support behind the scenes. Now, on the flip side, if I need someone, he's there too, right? So it's kind of a reciprocate thing, right? He's like an uncle to my son, RJ. And it's like, hey, I'm doing brakes on my car. Can RJ come out and help, right? I'm like, yeah, it's a great training technique. And it's like, he'll come home and it's like, so did you learn something? Yeah. So, yeah, what did you do? Well, I worked on his brakes and he reciprocated by giving me Chinese food. Working for Chinese food. Gotta love it.
Right.
But, you've got friends like that, man. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, I would come out and I would help you set up your store, right? And when people would come in, I'm like, are you here for the podcast? If not, buy something and get the fuck out.
Yeah, that would help. That'd be helpful also.
And honestly, going back to Kevin Smith's podcast, how many people do a podcast from a coffee shop?
Right. I think there are people doing stuff like that. The sound is different though. I even asked them. I even the Scum and Villainies Canteen because their sound is pretty good. And I actually texted them and said, hey, how are you doing your sound? And what they're actually doing is they actually are doing video with audio and converting it. They have like this big thing that they do. I'm like, that sounds like a pain in the ass, but that's what they do.
Well, let's talk about who would be behind the scenes on that. Only if you knew someone in the film industry that could do something like that. Who could we? I could reach for the sky on that answer, but I don't know who would know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is I'm not opening a business. So that's the bottom line, Ronz. I'm not opening a business.
I would buy that for $1.
You can't get coffee for free. Just forget it. All right. Well, yeah, that's it for me. I think our next plan for our next podcast coming up is we're going to get the Tremonti on for him to delve into his Star Wars conversation, which is going to be
Or,
fun.
given the schedule, Keith. Right.
Well,
I'm trying to do the workaround.
That's
on
not
that.
locked down yet, so I can already tell you that this next podcast is going to be Tremonti and Star Wars.
All right. So should I get a list of questions that will just fluster him?
No, I don't think we're going to have to do too much, except he's going to ask his questions. I'm going to answer them with him, and that's it. I don't think it's going to be. We just need his initial response and everything like that's going to be plenty. You don't have to have any. What questions do you need to have? You don't have to have any questions.
Like in Scene 2, Act 4.
No, you don't have to.
What color did you notice that lightsaber was versus all the others?
It's
and
not
why
even about
was that?
It's not even about that. He's watching the movie, and he's going to talk about it. You don't have to. Trust me, you don't have to have anything prepared. And if you prepare something, I would suggest you don't, because when you prepare shit, it's usually shits. So.
Well, no, I had the entire podcast laid out in front of me right away. And I did mention it a couple of times, but, we kind of side-dwelled in that.
Yeah.
Dwelled. That's not a word, is it? No, dwell is it?
All right, well, let's wrap it up then. Nice talking to you, Ronz. Get ready for Star Wars next week, which will be, it will be before May the 4th. So maybe we can get him.
Speaking of days, by the way, because you mentioned it, you know what today is? 4, 3, 2, 1. No response from you. I have to give you a response for May 4th, but you don't get a response.
Because May 4th is far more important and it happens every year.
So is May 6th.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it for me then. The Beaveman saying adios, mooch fuckos.
And from the Ronz and Tremonti and the Swan, A.
And incidentally, I never introduced the Ronz, but if you didn't know who he was,
you're not listening to the podcast.
You're not listening to the podcast. Peace.